welcome all the folks who are arriving today. This is the end of your first full day. This is the end of our third full day. And welcome to our old hands up there on the screen. Thanks for being here. The third full day of Sesshin. On the one hand, apropos of our pondering time, the different characteristics of time, doesn't it seem like we've been here forever? And suddenly, it's the kind of the end of the third day. Like, how'd that happen? It kind of reminds me of bringing up children, It's relentless day by day, but then all of a sudden, we're waving goodbye as they go out into the world. So, for those of us who've been sitting here this whole week, we're really getting used to the body being in this position, in all of its various positions, and relaxing into the schedule. And for those of you who have just arrived today, you're walking into a warmed up zendo. We've been waiting for you, anxiously, gratefully, you returning, joining us. This zendo is suffused with quiet mind and settled energy. And so just relax. The intention in this sesshin is to be very relaxed and not to have a pressure cooker feel to it. To see what the benefit of that is. What is the benefit of being able to relax together and enjoy a somewhat leisurely actual schedule, and not sitting for 11 hours during the day. Very few, much less sitting, and yet it seems potent. The sitting has been quite potent. So we're all encouraged to practice what Dogen says is practice easy and perfect. Here we are. And we've been working with the fascicle, one bright pearl. And do notice if you are expecting to understand the entirety of this image. There's more to understanding than what can be stated in words, which is really the whole treasure of a Zen-oriented practice. This is what we can open to, what is beyond words. It's what we meet when we're relaxed and present and able to notice the nuances and subtleties of this one very brief life. I mean, in a certain way, our lives are rather like the quick passing of a sesshin. A life is a really tough sesshin, and it goes by relentlessly, slowly, and suddenly it's gone by. So, being able to open past our habit mind into the more nuanced and subtle mind is incredibly valuable. It's precious. It's one bright jewel. So, talking about understanding, first, it's important to agree that understanding things is very useful. We love words. Some of us more than others. Some of us are addicted to words and read all the time. And others much less so. We spend most of our days with Dharma words, which is Dharma language is sometimes called living language, as opposed to dead language, which is ordinary language, which is just by rote and by habit that we use, unexamined, using words because we've used them a million times or we hear them all the time. So, as we spend more of our days with Dharma teachings, we come to appreciate how theory and practice, the theory that we gather through the words, are the same thing, expressed in two different ways. When Dharma words hit the mark, we can really break through habitual obstructions or ones that we did not accurately identify. So one of the functions of Dharma language is identifying what's what, not identity with, coming up with a narrow identity. And when we break through these obstructions, these ideas, these narrow self-definitions, we have much more room to move around in our life, in our ordinary life, in our familiar life. We're free to use words, but not be used by them. So one of the benefits of studying a fascicle, for instance, or any sutra, is that we come into a much more inquisitive attitude toward words, which carries over. So, that's one of the benefits of this copying practice. You go through, you write down all these words, and then you underline ones that, like, yeah, what is that? Or, it brings something up. So you really start to get much more sensitized to words, which is really helpful, because words kind of run our ordinary life and can run our entire life if we're not practitioners. So using words but not getting caught by them, not being held hostage by our narrow understandings. So when we talk about understanding, it's really valuable. Understanding is really valuable. Understanding brings to us a sense of congruence, sense of meaning, sense of value, and being included, and part of this, whatever it is. Theory, and so much of what we read Buddhistically is food for the thinking mind. Words, concepts. We include some, we exclude others. And we can appreciate how thinking is a narrative matrix that selects, distinguishes, draws boundaries around, orders, makes things feel upside down or right side up. So we become oriented. And so thoughts do have their place in one bright mind. Everything functions together. This talk is all words, which are occupying this moment. I appreciate you giving attention to these words, and as such, hopefully, has use. Dharma words can articulate and grant permission to acknowledge more of what we experience. And that's one of the things that I always thought initially was such a relief to come across a way of describing experience that was really, I had not had room to include a lot of the kind of shadowy side, unarticulated aspects of my experience. helps us relax, therefore, with what is familiar. And so actually when we're relaxed, we can see much more fully into what we're experiencing. And this changes our view profoundly as time goes by. We can safely be affected by feeling states and become more accepting of them and curious about the precariousness, the predictability and unpredictability with whatever unfolds. But this thing about feeling that we can safely be affected by our own emotions, we can safely be affected by our own thoughts, we can be guided, we can gain skill by responding to what we really are directly seeing going on. It's incredibly freeing. So there's theory and then there's practice, which leads me to ask, why must we understand in order for our experience to be complete? Now, the answer to that's obvious. But in another way, I like the question. Why do I have to understand something in order to feel at ease with something that is unfamiliar? Must I always have a verbal handle on everything? Is that the best way to approach my life? Or can I just relax, even sometimes with what is incongruent or brand new, and take it in its own forms, on its own terms, just as it is? So, of course, I have a little story about a walk that I had recently at Bald Hill. I was walking on the path, and I met a coarse brown toad who looked surprised, as was I. And this toad was sitting along the path on a soggy cushion of leaves at the bog's edge. You know, the beavers have really done a number on the woods there along one of the paths. And first, for a little bit, it looked like a nice pond, but now it's really a bog. It's kind of a swamp. But there it is, overflowing on across the path. And we haven't even had much rain, so I can't imagine what's going to happen when it's really raining. But anyway, meeting this toad was direct, wordless. Everything stopped for a moment. And clearly, I stopped, the toad stopped. We looked at each other. It was like arrows meeting in midair. It was really alive. It was a gigantic moment. And minutely present. And this toad had a very horny appearance. Everything was very sharp about it. And dark, nubbly skin. And very intelligent eyes. Is that possible for a toad? I don't know. But this was an intelligent toad. And it was all an unexpected surprise. And if this was what it was like for me, I wonder what it was like for the toad. It really causes me to ponder what was that experience, because there I am, I'm looking down at this amazing creature, but it's looking up at a very large, strange, non-water creature. Very lively moment. And how precarious it was. It was a moment that was tipping over and gone. And it was gone. And it will never be regained. I'm telling you about it now, and it's totally different. But it affected me, and it was a gift. The wordlessness of it made it even more potent in its effect, which is a good lesson for me. And like any intimate moment, intimate with a toad, were words needed to make our meeting more complete, more satisfying, more true? Words would have been ridiculous. So some people came in the other direction, and they arrived at this wet spot, and I said, "Oh wow, look, a toad! Woo!" That's a different response to the same toad. So the place of words in our life shifts our relationship to words. The world in all the 10 directions is the all-inclusive jewel, the one bright pearl, filled with words and also filled with no words, empty of words, thoroughly direct. And there's nothing to worry about, since everything functions in the Dharma world. So this is Dharma language, one bright pearl. It's Dharma language. So that's one answer to the question of I don't get it. These two different kinds of things are going on in Buddhism. One is so ordinary and one is so incredibly special. So in the Dharma world, we ponder, we experience directly just what is. All the light and all the darkness. One pearl. One bright pearl, one dark pearl. The fascicle reads, "Do not be concerned about falling or not falling into cause and effect on the 6 paths." You remember what the 6 paths are? You're about to be reminded. You're going to go, "Oh yeah, I remember that." But this, not to be concerned about falling or not falling into cause and effect, runs counter to the usual teaching, which is really pay attention. You don't want to fall into these. You don't want to be reborn into any of these paths. And nothing to worry about. It doesn't sound realistic to the ordinary mind that there's nothing to worry about. This is a really screwed up world. There's a lot to worry about. And we surely are urged to be mindful of the precepts and are guided by them to choose wholesome behavior. And there's a promise that we receive. And that wise bodhisattva-like behavior will bring us happiness and the causes of happiness. And that's been borne out by my own experience, and probably you all. Everybody has taken precepts here, you know. It's really quite a terrific set that showed up for this sesshin, because everybody's so primed to really settle, really use it, and knows the value. Do not be concerned about falling or not falling into cause and effect. As soon as you hear an allusion to the 6 paths, do not be concerned about falling or not falling into cause and effect in the 6 paths. This is an allusion where we know we're in the territory of the early cultural teachings of India, where the 6 paths are understood as separate and immutable as material, whereas we moderns think of them as psychological states that have material consequences, definitely. So see if you can identify with any of these. The animal realm, which is entirely absorbed in finding food and procreating, and that's definitely dominates in certain life stages. Then there's the angry gods, or the jealous gods, who are hostage to heavy feeling states. And without spiritual knowledge, or even the inclination to follow a spiritual path or to inquire, or to notice it being embodied around them. And they're concerned entirely with getting and keeping power. So we're seeing this enacted on our national stage. Then there are the hell realms, that have different forms of intense suffering. And these typically include the hot hells and the cold hells, as well as hells in which beings are being eaten alive, beaten, and tortured, depending on the unwholesome karma that they've accumulated. So that really warns us to be careful about cause and effect. It does me. And then there's the hungry ghost realm. And that's where the restlessness is overwhelming, and excessive craving and attachment is never enough. It's not only a moment of not enough, there's never enough. And that's one way that addiction is described. And there are so many forms of addiction, so many forms, never enough. Our whole civilization is based on being hungry ghosts. And then there's the Deva realm, shining beings, where everything is lovely. There's plenty of everything: beauty, wealth, power, fame. But watch out, and everything changes, as everything does. And then there's the human realm, which is really fortuitous because it's the only one of the 6 realms where we can awaken, where we can hear the Dharma. And it's the possibility of enlightenment, constantly creating more difficulties through our greediness and hostility and ignorance. And every time we realize we have done that, we can say, oh good, now I can really practice with this. Now I can deepen my intention, deepen my paying attention to everything that I do, to what I do. So we may experience all of these realms, all 6 in one sesshin. Definitely we do in our life. And they describe and permeate the human condition of suffering and dissatisfaction. Do not be concerned about falling or not falling into cause and effect in the 6 paths. But then he says something that contradicts that. And you might recognize this from chanting the Komyozo Zanmai, which is amazingly, wonderfully paired with one bright pearl teaching, isn't it? Do not sit like a hell dweller, a hungry ghost or animal, human being or jealous beings or shining beings. Do not sit like a human being. Isn't that interesting that ends up there? What else are we going to do? What else are we going to do but sit like a human being? That drives that question deep. What do you mean? Aren't I a human being? So how do we reckon these 2 positions of concerns, falling or not falling into cause and effect, in relation to all of the variability in our life? What are the states of mind where you plunge into these realms? What are your states of mind where you find that you are caught? What situations confront you with your own greed? Anybody? Anybody brave enough to venture a description, a brief description, something, a situation that confronts you with your greed?
Food.
Food.
Cookies.
Cookies.
Attention.
Tension.
Attention.
Attention.
Having gained 3 pounds over Thanksgiving confronts me with my
these are very immediate. And then there's the feeling that comes when you meet a person who is not housed as you walk into the grocery store and they catch your eye. There's that moment of, or you receive a request for money from a worthy organization. That comes up a fair amount. Or when you are gripped by jealousy or lust, which are forms of greed. How do you act? When a friend or a family member or a neighbor lets slip a comment that allies them with some kind of hostile or repulsive political opinion, how do you act? What happens internally in the body? And what happens to your behavior in relation to them? What happens to your face? So with the Dharma view as our guide, we begin to notice all the inward and outward behaviors and causes for the seeds that we're planting in each action. And one of the subtle effects of consistent practice is being aware in advance of the possible effects of our choices. This is really a central issue in program planning at the Zen Center. Everything we do is always about what is the intention, what do we want to nourish, what will help and what will hinder. But that's true in all kinds of ways in our lives in general. And the teachings emphasize that each thing we do plants seeds that create conditions for our shared world, which is part of the guidance for how to live at a time when things are so bad and we are just one person or one little group. This is a shared world, so if we attend minutely and well and wholeheartedly, locally, it has effects beyond what we know. When we're swept along, when we get caught, we might revert to our habitual karmic responses, or not. So this fascicle emphasizes that all of our trips and stumbles are part of one bright pearl. Not ignoring cause and effect from beginning to end is the face of the bright pearl, is the eye of the bright pearl. So we don't get too worried and we also don't ignore. That sounds a bit like the middle way. And there's a very good case made for why this practice really should be called the middle way. This is a middle way practice. In every which way we learn is finding that the common phrase now is the sweet spot between one extreme or another, between opposites that never perch, right? And we never perch. So we Buddhists love to delve into the dual nature of our minds and the mind that we experience as me in here and the world out there. And this is just the way it seems. And it's true in one sense, in the ordinary sense. But then there's the Buddhistic view applied to our experience, which is a much more ecological view. And that's the way I understand how infinite conditions are emerging as any form, every nen. A nen is one third of a mind moment. 1/3. 3 mind moments make up a moment. Have you noticed that? Just taking a little sidestep here. When we talk about moment, we talk about moment, speaking language, we talk about moment constantly. What is a moment? Be sure you examine what appears to be a moment. On the one hand, there is no such thing as a moment. Where's the beginning of a moment? Where does it end? So Buddhism has solved that by talking about nens. So we just solve it by breaking it down even into smaller components. So even a moment doesn't stand alone. A nen doesn't stand alone. Everything that makes up the self is temporary and mutually interdependent. None of us stand alone. Dogen frequently refuses to get caught by any duality, which is why he can be so confusing. But then something opens up in us, even in spite of continuing to feel that we don't understand Dogen's words. There's something that really makes sense. There's something that really gets nailed and pointed to. What is it that opens up? Well, first of all, our curiosity, like, what is he talking about? It's very disconcerting not to, I mean, we're all so intelligent, we're so well educated, we really get it, you know? And then we read Dogen, and we genuinely say, what is he talking about? So inquiry, the mind that doesn't know, don't know mind. And knowing Dogen, I always know that, first of all, I'm going to start reading something by him and I'm not going to understand it. But as I work with it, it gets more and more specifically penetrable. And you may have discovered that as you work with this poem, or this fascicle, that it's making more and more sense as you go along. It's making more and more living sense, like according to how it feels to be alive. So, and anything that we read or anything that we study in this realm, we want to know for ourselves. Because no matter how much we look up to Dogen, for instance, it's what he writes is hearsay, basically. Until we really get for ourselves what that's pointing at. And that's, that's really, we're always admonished not to believe hearsay. Not to believe, Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the ways that he wrote the precepts is, do not believe anything you do not know directly for yourself. Which sweeps in most of the world, actually, and definitely all over the news. Unless we happen to be directly affected. And then the news clearly didn't get it the way it happened. Only what we experience for ourselves is of value. And the Buddha even urges us not to take any authority before our own. Be a light unto yourself. He was, and anybody that goes their own way has to be courageous enough and tolerate uncertainty enough to go your own way if it's not the path that you have been shown. So because only our own experience does anything come together, only if we experience it for ourselves. That's the only time it makes any difference. The duality view is a limited view marked by separation and opposition. And we already considered the limitations of the 8 worldly winds last night. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, and fame or status and disrepute and disgrace. Anything that has an opposite inherently foreshortens and cuts off our full life. So we reduce and stereotype to our own peril, dismissing so much of the treasure that comes our way in the actual world. When we're so busy, it's very easy to do that. It's one of the problems with busy. We don't take the time to really meet and experience fully, pay attention. And I don't know, maybe you have had this experience or it has been expressed to you, but I've heard several people say, I came across these really generous, kind people and it turns out they're MAGA. And there's this great, like, whoa, what do I do with that? What does my face look like? How silly. How silly. Cutting off all the richness of another person. Take, for instance, the way that we cut things off. We cut off what things are truly like when we narrow to prejudice or stereotype. I think it's one of the things that's so disturbing and difficult about masked ice people. Is that there's no way it is a pure cartoon stereotype that's being presented. There is no way to see a face. And very often when you really look at a face, you see a lot more than what they think they're presenting. But if we can't see the face, it's just the power. It's just the threat. So think about a pearl. What is a pearl? You say one bright pearl. It's a mote of sand that's irritating the soft, moist flesh of an oyster. How are we not fully relating? A mote of sand on its way to the great ocean that's caught by a living being, a grain of great value in and of itself. That's what we all are. That's what this life is. So if wholeness, and maybe that's what we could say is one of the fruits of practice, is recognizing the wholeness of every moment. There's no space to fit even a piece of paper between anything in this moment. It's whole and complete, right? Wholeness is found in the flow of each nan. And this has profound consequences for how we experience our lives. Linji comments, if something has arisen, do not try to make it continue. Okay? You have a wonderful moment in Zazen. Of course you try to make it continue. If something has not arisen, don't try to make it arise. So it's really talking about how we relate to our will, that this life does not flow if we are entirely identified with our will. Another way to say it would be having to control everything cuts it all off. So in other words, respect what is as it is. It is a present from the present, for the present, for the time being. I thought it was very clever when I figured that out. It's a present from the present for the present. Don't cut it off. So as it flows along, the past has disappeared and the present emerges continually. This is the teaching of no self. Of course, this is the teaching of no self. No separate, fixed, forever form of self. We're always conditioning and being conditioned. We're always causing and we're always the consequence of the causes. The entire world in 10 directions is one bright pearl. Even within a mote of dust, a tiny bit of sand is contained in the 10 directions, contains the 10 directions. I think that does that come from the festival? I don't know. But if you think of it, any little thing, actually, it has all the same 10 directions that we danced today. So now we can turn the light inward and illuminate the 10 directions and be illuminated by them. And the 10 directions really means infinite directions. All of the wonderful details, colors, shades, bits and pieces, the richness, the intimate possibilities when we awaken to this one bright pearl, which is a metaphor. It is. And it's also the vitality of life. It is. So I want to read a poem just before we finish here, which is such a humble, wonderful expression of one bright pearl. The sensibility, I don't know who wrote this, it was in my stack, in my folder. It's called The Half of the Dream That Is Ordinary. Does anybody know that? Hmm? The salt shaker lives contented on the shelf near the stove. If it wants to change into anything else, say an oregano or cumin vessel, something a little more exotic perhaps, like the Madras curry powder ampule or Damasio jar, it has never breathed a word. Not one word of complaint for its humble role in the culinary excursions implemented in my kitchen. I rely on the salt shaker in a way I don't rely on other seasonings, the way I rely on rain to fall in Oregon rather than the spicy sun, or the way a simple routine is never invested with a particular glamour or eccentricity, but hovers at the edge of the laced assemblies of luminescent moment-by-moment earthly belonging and daily redemption. Shall I read it again? The half of the dream that is ordinary. I think this is by a Buddhist practitioner. Certainly seems that way. The salt shaker lives contented on the shelf near the stove. If it wants to change into anything else, say an oregano or cumin vessel, something a little more exotic perhaps, like the Madras curry powder ampule or Damasio jar, it has never breathed a word. Not one word of complaint for its humble role in the culinary excursions implemented in my kitchen. I rely on the salt shaker in a way I don't rely on other seasonings, the way I rely on the rain to fall in Oregon rather than the spicy sun, or the way a simple routine is never invested with a particular glamour or eccentricity, but hovers at the edge of the laced assemblies of luminescent, moment-by-moment earthly belonging and daily redemption. So, one bright pearl, ordinary, extraordinary, one bright pearl. In a certain way, this is salt shaker practice. And we roll little bits of salt from the great ocean.